Hello, POLSCI 1, back for Chapter 18. This is a super long chapter. There's a lot to cover. I'm not going to cover every slide because it's just so much and it's going to go way over the 20 minutes. So I'll hit the important points, stuff that you should know for the test, especially the final. So let's get started. So Chapter 18, we're dealing with civil liberties and civil rights. So your rights, civil liberties, all rights reserved in the Bill of Rights. So when we talk about civil liberties, it's all the rights given to you by the first 10 amendments. And when we talk about civil rights, we're talking about the 14th Amendment. So all rights given to you by the 14th Amendment. So 14th Amendment becomes very important, especially for the finals. You should also know the Bill of Rights. You should know the different rights that you do have. All right, so first, freedom of expression. So when we're talking about freedom of expression, we're talking about the First Amendment. So in the First Amendment, there are 5 rights given to you in the First Amendment. The rights that are given to you in the First Amendment are religion. So you have freedom of religion, speech, press, peaceably assemble, and petition the government. These 5 rights are given to you by the First Amendment, and they're ingrained in the First Amendment. So we'll go over, I don't think we'll go over all of them, but we'll briefly go over some of them. Speech is probably the most important one, but the value of free expression. Free expression is necessary to the political process set up by the Constitution. For us to have a free society, it all has to start with free expression. You should be allowed to freely express yourself. Government cannot silence you on these things. Free expression allows the dominant wisdom of the day to be challenged. If you want society to change, yes, you are able to go out and speak freely. They should not be able to shut you up if you want to change society. That's the whole basis of the First Amendment. Free expression aids self-development. You become more of a human being because you are able to you are allowed to freely express yourself. You're able to challenge the thoughts of the day. Intellectual and artistic expression may contribute to realizing one's full potential as a human being. You are allowed to challenge and fight for what you believe is right. And I get to this when we talk about free expression and freedom of speech. Even if you disagree with that speech, it still should be allowed because that is part of free expression. This is how society changes. We got rid of slavery because of free speech and free expression. We got rid of bigotry because of free speech and free expression. Well, we didn't get rid of bigotry, but it's we become more of an open society because of free speech. Free speech should be allowed because that's what our country is based on. Obscenity is not protected speech, so you cannot say bad words and then say that's my right, that's my First Amendment right to free speech. So it is not protected speech. So that's what I'll just cover with when we talk about obscenity. You cannot say it's my right because, hey, it's free speech. Freedom of religion, you need to remember 2 clauses with the freedom of religion. You need to know the free exercise of religion, and you need to know the establishment clause. So you have the free exercise clause and the establishment clause of freedom of religion. So there's two clauses you need to know. Establishment clause. Government may not favor one religion over another. So government cannot choose one religion over another. So we're not all Catholic, we're not all Jewish. They don't make you go to church. So they cannot establish a religion. So the government cannot set up a state religion. That is not allowed. Government may not favor religion over no religion. They cannot force you to go to church. So government cannot establish or favor one religion over another. So this is separation of church and state. This is where you get this idea of separation of church and state. Government cannot establish a religion. They must be separate, church and state. Free exercise. Free exercise. No, you don't get to go to in-shape city for free. Free exercise means that you can freely exercise your religion. Government prohibited from interfering with the practice of religion. Government cannot get involved in the practice of your religion. Government cannot prohibit the free exercise of religion. So, if you are Catholic, they cannot prohibit you from taking the sacraments. If you are voodoo and you read the bloodstains on the wall from a chicken whose head you cut off, they cannot get involved in that. Government is prohibited from that. As long as it's part of religion, then you can freely exercise your religion. So when we look at freedom of religion, different aspects, issues concerning separation of church and state include school vouchers. When we talk about school vouchers, that's the state providing your parents with money so they can choose your school. The reason it's dealt with religion is because some people choose Catholic schools or Jewish schools instead of public schools, and so that's establishing one religion over another is the argument. That's why they're not allowed. Prayer schools, You can pray yourself in school, but you cannot. I cannot lead a prayer because I'm paid for by the state. So I know some of you before test throw up prayers. You can do that. I can't lead a prayer because I am paid by the state. Teaching evolution. Well, should we take creationism as well? Well, which creation stories are we going to do? So when we look at evolution, that becomes, and if you're religious, is that something that should be taught? And then religious observances in official settings, we don't call it Christmas break anymore. We call it winter break, spring break instead of Easter break. So we don't say those terms anymore. Right to privacy. There's an inherent right to privacy in the Constitution. So there's no specific right to privacy, but the Supreme Court said there's an inherent right to privacy, that the founders meant there to be a right to privacy. So when you look at privacy rights, we're looking at abortion. It's my body, I can do with it what I want, so that's tied to the right to privacy. Contraception, again, that goes to abortion as well. And physician-assisted suicide. Again, that goes to my body, I can do with it what I want. All right, fundamentals of American criminal justice. Let's get into criminal justice. U.S. government of laws. It is the rule of law in the United States instead of human beings, because again, human beings tend to be biased, whereas the law is impartial. U.S. justice system insists simply that a person be proved guilty, but that the guilt be proved in a legally prescribed way. So if somebody beats a confession out of you, that is violating your rights, then you cannot be found guilty. This idea is inherent as government of men, of laws, not of men. Again, the rule of law. Law is impartial, whereas human beings tend to be partial. So if we follow the law should be impartial. Courts should not just make sure that wrongdoers are punished, but to see that law enforcement personnel obey the commands of the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights limits police and law enforcement to do certain things, and we're going to go over them. We're all innocent until proven guilty. The burden of proof is on the government to prove that you have committed that crime. It is up to government to prove that you are guilty. It is the state's responsibility to prove that the suspect's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. If there's any doubt in anybody's mind, then you should let that person go. So if you've ever sat on jury duty, you talk about reasonable doubt. If you have any doubt in your mind about that person's guilt, then you cannot convict them. You should let them go. So the state's job is to prove that they are guilty. The suspect does not have to prove innocence against a presumption of guilt in order to go free. So the person that is the suspect, the person that's on trial, they do not have to prove that they're innocent. All they have to do is have enough reasonable doubt in the jury's mind to be let go. You'll hear all about this when you take jury duty. Prosecution must also demonstrate criminal intent. What was the intent behind the crime? Why did they commit that crime? Alright, so let's look at some amendments that are specific to this. Fourth Amendment. Withholds from police the unbounded discretion to arrest and search people and their possessions. So it does not allow police to search your possessions. They must have what? They must have a warrant, right? Or probable cause. If there's probable cause for them to search. Now I get into arguments. We normally spend probably like 45 minutes, a whole class on what is probable cause, and we talk about warrants and things like that. Probable cause, one thing I would say is if you are driving and you're swerving over the lines, that's probably probable cause to search your car. Going 5 miles over the speed limit, maybe probable cause. It just depends. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you what's right or wrong. But for the most part, they do need a warrant, or they have to have probable cause. Warrantless searches of arrested suspects or automobiles are permitted in certain circumstances. So if you pull over and they search your car, well, they had probable cause. What was the probable cause? But this is where they can get in trouble. When police do a warrantless search, they must convince the judge afterward that they had probable cause to act. What was their probable cause to search the vehicle? If nothing is found, then the cop should be in trouble because they did an illegal search. Judicial validation of a warrantless search does not occur unless incriminating evidence is found. Incriminating evidence must be found for the judge to allow that search to be legal. So something has to be found. Bugging must have a warrant. That's listening to conversations, phone phone conversations. Because of secret nature, wiretapping courts have had a hard time constraining their unlawful use. It's hard to, you don't know that you're being listened to. And really they can't use recordings without you knowing in court. Fifth Amendment, protection against self-incrimination. Denies government the authority to use interrogations to coerce confessions from suspects or to require suspects to testify at their own trial. When we talk about the Fifth Amendment, you always hear, I plead the Fifth. That means that you don't incriminate yourself. So if you're doing something illegal at the time you're a witness of another crime, and they ask you what you're doing, you can plead the Fifth. That means that they can't, you won't incriminate yourself. Now they will open an investigation against you and put you under arrest for your testimony. So if you're asked a question and you feel that you did something illegal, you will plead the Fifth. So you do not have to testify against yourself. Miranda rights come about from these amendments. Miranda versus Arizona, heard in the Supreme Court, advised the suspect the right to remain silent. So every time you watch cops or a police show and they talk about reading them their rights, these are the Miranda rights that are being read. So you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one will be provided to you. So these are your rights that are given to you by the Fourth, Fifth Amendment of the right to remain silent. You do not have to testify against yourself. Things that you say after that your rights are read to you can be used against you. If you have the right to an attorney to be present when you're being interrogated, and if you can't afford one, then the state will provide one to you. All right, Sixth Amendment, right to speedy trial and trial by jury. Really, Sixth Amendment, pretty short. Eighth Amendment, when we get to Eighth Amendment, we're just looking at no cruel and unusual punishment. You cannot be put to death for jaywalking. Even though I think you should be put to death for jaywalking, you can't be. So certain kinds of penalties like torture may not be imposed at all, so we do not torture. Penalties should not be grossly out of proportion to the severity of the crime. So again, I think jaywalkers should be put to death, but that's definitely grossly out of proportion to the severity of the crime. It's jaywalking, they should be put to death. Certain acts or conditions such as alcoholism may not be made criminal. And then Second Amendment, because we jumped past the Second Amendment, we're looking at the right to bear arms. You have two arguments for and against the Second Amendment. If you're pro-gun, it's an individual right, the right of a person to have a gun, whereas if you're anti-gun, it's the right of a state to have a militia, because that's what it says in the Constitution. So just know the differences between those 2 points. The reason the founders included it was because it's a protection against an oppressive government. All right, Civil Rights Amendment. So now we're looking at, we're going to go into civil rights. 13th Amendment, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the United States. So the 13th Amendment gets rid of slavery, it outlaws slavery. 14th Amendment, this is the important one. 14th Amendment, there are 4 rights given to you by the 14th Amendment. All persons born and naturalized in the United States are citizens. So you are a citizen if you are born or naturalized here in the United States. Okay? So that's 1. 2, states cannot abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens. So the second thing the 14th Amendment does is it applies the Bill of Rights to the states. Before the 14th Amendment, states could limit your free speech rights. They could say, well, the Bill of Rights only applies to the national government, not state governments. Now with the 14th Amendment, it applies the Bill of Rights to the states. So the 14th Amendment, that's the second most important thing, or really that's probably the most important thing that it does. It applies the Bill of Rights to the states. Third, all persons, whether or not they are citizens, are entitled to due process. You are all entitled to due process in the United States. So you get your day in court. If you are arrested, you are given these rights. So you're entitled to due process. That's the third thing. And the last one for the 14th Amendment, all persons are entitled to equal protection. So we're all equally protected under the law. So when you'll probably get an essay question out of the 14th Amendment. You'll need to name these 4 things and tell me what they are, what they do. Okay? So you are a citizen of the United States, naturalized, born or naturalized. Applies the Bill of Rights to the states. You're all entitled to due process and equal protection under the law. All right, 15th Amendment. The right to vote shall not be denied because of race, color, previous condition of servitude. So gives former male slaves the right to vote. Of course, what's missing is women still do not have the right to vote, and they will not get the right to vote for another 50 years. All right, Plessy versus Ferguson. Stated that segregation did not violate the 14th Amendment. So this is a case that went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that you can segregate as long as they have equal facilities. So it creates a separate but equal doctrine. So it's fine to segregate as long as they have equal facilities. Of course, they're not equal facilities, so it is unconstitutional. It's paved the way Constitution for a system of racial segregation developed especially in the South. Also, we can look at voting rights for African Americans. In the South or other places, they would have poll taxes, required a payment fee to vote, so you had to pay to vote. Again, intended to disenfranchise African Americans, poor African Americans. Was outlawed in national elections by the 24th Amendment. I was outlawed in all elections by the Supreme Court in 1966. Of course, you might have some that will be able to pay a poll tax, so then you do literacy tests, required potential voters to read, recite, and interpret complicated texts. So, here's Homer's Odyssey telling me what it's about. Again, disenfranchise African Americans. And if you had somebody that passed both the poll tax and the literacy test, then they were given a good character test. Just saying, well, you're not a good character. So there was a grandfather clause restricting voting to individuals who could prove that their grandfathers had voted prior to 1867. So exempted people from poll taxes, literacy tests, and good character tests. And was used to exempt whites from poll taxes and from literacy tests. Plessy versus Ferguson, the case that you'll want to remember is the first Brown versus Board of Education. Supreme Court rules public school segregation violates the 14th Amendment. So what the court does in 1954 is overturn Plessy versus Ferguson. They get rid of Plessy versus Ferguson and say that's unconstitutional. This is the new standard. So in Brown versus Board of Education, this is the case you need to remember. Supreme Court gets rid of segregation. There is a second, but I'm not so stressed about you knowing the second because that just allows the president to send troops in to integrate. Women's rights, 19th Amendment, 1920. So it's 100 years it just passed that women have had the right to vote in the United States. The women's rights movement was spurred by the publication of Better Feelings, The Feminine Mystique. If you look throughout American history, the women's rights movement and the civil rights movement work hand in hand. They work together on trying to bring rights for everybody. So you have the abolitionist movement early on in American history, and you have the suffrage movement. In the 60s, you have the women's rights movement working closely with the civil rights movement to bring about equality within all of society. The women's rights movement did argue for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, did fall 3 states short. So the Equal Rights Amendment was men and women are equal. You need 3/4 of the states to agree to amend the Constitution, so it fell 3 states short of that 3/4. The women's rights movement has targeted gender discrimination by challenging policies and laws in federal courts. Walmart gets sued because they don't have a lot of women managers back in the 90s. They get sued, they lose, so now there's more women managers at Walmart. Has advocated and encouraged increasingly prominent role for women in government and politics. There are more women now running for public office, right? Hillary Clinton ran 4 years ago. We have Kamala Harris running as the vice president right now, so we have more women stepping up into more prominent government roles. Workplace discrimination, sexual harassment. I'm going to skip over this because I'm running out of time. I'm sure if you have a job, you'll have look at discrimination in the workplace, and they'll have it. We do have wage discrimination. Women earn 76 cents for every dollar earned by men. Well, that is a true statistic. What it is that most of the top executives are men, high CEOs that get paid millions of dollars, as compared to there's not a lot of women CEOs. So let's use the numbers. So it's known as the glass ceiling. Phenomenon of women holding a few of the top positions in professions or businesses. If we look at other minorities, we have Latinos. Largest minority in the United States, growing political power. Asian Americans, Asian Americans are the fastest growing minority in the United States today. Native Americans less likely to attend colleges. If we look at locally in our area, at the Palace, the Yokuts don't want to go to school because they get paid by the casino. So, but they want to turn it around, have people go back to college and graduate. We'll look at older Americans. Really, you just can't discriminate because of age. The Age Discrimination Employment Act, you cannot discriminate. You can't say no to somebody because of their age, unless the occupation states or quantifies that it is a young person. And you can't force somebody into retirement anymore. Not allowed. Disabled rights, the Americans with Disabilities Act requires all public buildings and services to be accessible to people with disabilities. So if you have stairs going up the front, you should have ramps going up the side, right? If you have a parking lot, you should also have handicapped parking spaces. Requires employers make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities. When I worked at a retail job, we had to make sure the stacks were so far apart so that people can get through. Even disabled Americans that needed assistance. Defines disabilities as physical or mental impairments that substantially limit everyday activities. Now, I'm not going to worry about this case, so you don't need to worry about that for the test. I don't have a lot here. More states are passing laws to protect LGBTQ. Again, that's why it's important for the First Amendment. LGBTQ rights, especially like marriage, has become more acceptable in today's society because, again, we allow free speech. Marriage has become more acceptable within American society. Affirmative action makes up for current effects of past discrimination. And it's the idea of workplace integration. We'll have more people be able to have jobs, open up more jobs for minorities. So full and equal opportunities in education, employment, etc. for all. All right, so that's it. I have a couple more bullet points, but I'm over 20 minutes. So want to end here. All right, you have California left, and I'll go over that in the next video. So thank you. We'll see you guys later. Bye.